All right, so today we're going deep on something pretty specific in the healthcare world. Safety pin needles.
Uh-huh.
You shared some info suggesting this market is really taking off, and we're aiming to,
Yeah.
dig out the most important insights for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting because it seems niche, but it's actually way bigger than people think.
Yeah, and really, going beyond just those surface-level numbers
Right.
and really understanding what's causing all this growth.
Totally.
So to do that, we've been looking at this market report.
Uh-huh.
It's called the Global Safety Pen Needles Market Report 2025.
Catchy title.
Yeah, real catchy.
Yeah.
It's the global edition
Sure.
by Cognitive Market Research, and it was updated really recently in February 2025.
Oh, wow. So it's very up to date.
Super up to date, and just to give you an idea of just how big this thing is,
Okay.
the report estimates the global safety pen needles market
Mm-hmm.
at a whopping 750 million USD in 2025.
Wow.
And that's huge.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting. They project it will more than double to 482.04 million USD by 2033,
Okay.
with a compound annual growth rate of 10.4%.
Wow. So that's a pretty significant jump.
That's a massive expansion.
Yeah, it really is.
So the question becomes, what's the underlying story here?
Right.
What does this kind of growth really tell us about broader trends in healthcare, and self-medication?
Yeah, exactly. That's the big question, right? This
Yeah.
isn't just about more needles, it's
Yeah.
reflecting these evolving needs
Right.
and priorities and how chronic conditions like diabetes are being managed globally.
Yeah.
And the report's analysis is super detailed.
Okay.
It covers a base year of 2024 historical data from 2021 to 2024, an estimated figure for 2025, and then a forecast all the way out to 2033.
Wow.
So it gives us a really clear picture of these trends.
So we've got a lot to cover.
Yeah.
Let's start with that big picture, like the global market size
Okay.
and that impressive growth projection.
Okay.
So we've noted the jump from 400 and 750 million USD to over 10 billion by 2033. What are the immediate takeaways from these numbers?
Well, I think it signifies a really strong and sustained demand for these safety pen needles, right?
Sure.
10.4% CAGR.
Yeah.
That's not a short-term spike.
Yeah.
It suggests a really consistent upward trajectory.
Yeah, for sure.
And so what's fascinating is to think about what's causing this steady increase across almost a decade.
Absolutely. It's not just a slight incline, it is a steep climb.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's look at where this growth is concentrated geographically.
Okay.
Which regions are the major players right now?
So right now, North America is the leader.
Okay.
They have the largest share, accounting for more than 40% of the global market.
Wow.
And their estimated market size for 2025 is 1757.50 million USD, with a projected CAGR of 8.8% through 2033.
And within North America, the U.S. is kind of the dominant force, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The United States market is estimated at 1,386.67 million USD in 2025,
Okay.
with a slightly lower CAGR of 8.6%.
Right.
Canada comes after that with a 210.90 million market
Got it.
and a somewhat higher growth rate of 9.6%.
Okay.
And then Mexico is at 159.93 million USD with a CAGR of 9.3%.
So North America is the current leader.
Uh-huh.
What's fueling their dominance?
Well, the report points to a pretty significant factor, which is the high prevalence of diabetes in the region.
Okay.
So that, coupled with a really well-established and advanced healthcare infrastructure, creates both a large patient base needing these devices and efficient systems for distributing them and using them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Established need and the systems in place.
Exactly.
Now, who's the second biggest piece of the pie?
So that would be Europe.
Okay.
They hold over 30% of the global market share with an estimated size of 1,377.50 million USD in 2025.
Okay.
And their projected CAGR is a strong 9.4%.
Now, Europe is an interesting one because it's a really diverse set of healthcare systems.
Yeah, definitely.
Are there any particular countries driving that growth?
Yeah, there are a few key players that stand out.
Okay.
So the UK market is estimated at 231.42 million USD with a really strong CAGR of 10.2%.
Okay.
Germany is also a substantial market at 272.75 million USD, growing at 9.6%.
Gotcha.
And France has a market size of 126.73 million USD and a KGR of 8.6%.
All right.
Then you've got Russia estimated at 213.51 million USD with a growth rate of 8.4%.
Okay.
Italy's market is 118.47 million USD with an 8.96 million USD with an 8.5% growth rate.
It's interesting to see kind of the variations in growth rates even within Europe.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
It just goes to show that there's a lot of nuance in this market, right?
Yeah.
And the report also gives figures for some of the smaller European markets.
Oh, wow.
So, for example, Sweden has a 42.70 million USD market and a 9.5% CAGR.
Okay.
Denmark is at 28.93 million and 9.2%.
Gotcha.
Switzerland with 20.66 million and 9.1%.
Mm.
And even Luxembourg has a market of 16.53 million USD with a 9.7% growth rate.
Wow.
And then the rest of Europe collectively accounts for 192.85 million USD with a CAGR of 8.1%.
So Europe's strong position seems to be driven by a couple of factors. I'm thinking maybe like a strong emphasis on patient safety
Yeah.
and well-defined regulatory frameworks.
I think that's a good point. The report suggests that increased awareness of diabetes across Europe and these stringent regulatory standards that favor safer medical devices, that really contributes to this market.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the region that's showing the most dynamic growth,
Okay.
which is Asia-Pacific or APAC.
This is where things get really exciting.
Yeah.
So APAC currently holds around 23% of the global market share with an estimated size of 1,140.00 million USD in 2025.
Okay.
But its projected CAGR is a whopping 13.2%. Making it the fastest growing region by far.
That's huge.
It is.
13.2% is a huge growth rate.
Yeah.
What's behind this rapid expansion?
I think several factors are at play.
Okay.
So China is the biggest market in the APAC region.
Gotcha.
At 478.80 million USD with a CAGR of 12.7%.
Okay.
India follows with a 113.00 million USD market. And get this, the highest growth rate mentioned in the entire report.
How good is it?
15.1%.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Then you've got Japan, also a substantial market, at 157.32 million USD with an 11.7% CAGR.
Mm-hmm.
And South Korea is at 136.80 million USD, growing at 12.3%.
Okay.
Australia has a market size of 59.28 million USD with a 12.5% growth rate.
So India at 15.1%.
Yeah.
That's really striking.
It is.
What makes the Indian market grow so much faster than others?
So the report suggests it's a few things happening at once.
Okay.
You've got a significant and growing population with diabetes,
Right.
rapidly improving healthcare infrastructure, which is expanding access to these modern treatments, and then increasing adoption of user-friendly technologies like these safety pen needles.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like this perfect storm of awareness, affordability, and convenience.
Right.
Yeah.
So that paints a really clear picture of a market on the rise.
Uh-huh.
And there are other significant growth areas within APAC too, right?
Absolutely. So Singapore is projected to grow at 13.5% with a market size of 22.80 USD.
Taiwan at 13% with 44.46 million USD.
Gotcha.
Southeast Asia collectively at 14% with 75.24 million USD.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the APAC region is also growing at 13% with a market size of 51.3 million USD.
So across the entire Asia-Pacific region, we're seeing a pretty consistent trend of this rapid growth.
Yeah, for sure.
It makes you wonder if this region will eventually overtake the current leaders.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Given these growth rates, it's definitely a possibility in the long term.
Yeah.
And it just highlights the increasing focus on diabetes management and adoption of these advanced medical devices in these rapidly developing economies.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
And move on to some other regions like South America.
Okay.
They also show considerable growth potential.
Yeah. South America currently holds over 5% of the global market share.
Okay.
With a 2025 size of 180.5 million USD and a projected CGR of 11.1%.
So are Brazil and Argentina like the main players there?
Yeah, they are.
Brazil has a market size of 77.25 million USD with a CAGR of 11.7%.
That's right.
And Argentina is at 30.32 million USD with a slightly higher growth rate of 12%.
Okay.
And then you also have Colombia, Peru, and Chile showing growth
Okay.
with market sizes of 16.06 million USD, 14.80 million USD, and 13.000 million USD respectively. And CAGRs ranging from 10.9% to 11.4%.
Gotcha.
And then the rest of South America combined is at 29.06 million USD with a CAGR of 10.2%.
So the growth in South America seems tied to similar factors we've seen elsewhere.
Yeah.
Like the increasing diabetes prevalence and a need for safer, more effective treatment.
Exactly. The report emphasizes the rising rates of diabetes and this growing demand for injection techniques that really prioritize safety and ease of use across the region.
Okay, so now let's look at the Middle East.
Okay.
It's a smaller market currently, but with a pretty noteworthy growth rate.
Yeah, it's definitely one to watch.
Okay.
So the Middle East holds around 2% of the global market with an estimated size of 190.00 million USD in 2025.
Okay.
And a strong CGR of 11.7%.
And it seems like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are significant markets within this region.
Yeah, they're definitely leading the pack.
Okay.
Saudi Arabia has a projected market size of 66.88 million USD with a CAGR of 12%.
Yep.
And the UAE is at 39.14 million USD, growing at 12.2%.
Gotcha.
And then Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt also show growth with market sizes of 15.2 million USD, 15.2 million USD, and 11.4 million USD, respectively.
Okay.
And KGRs ranging from 11.2% to 12.3%.
Wow.
And then the rest of the Middle East accounts for 42.18 million USD with a CAGR of 10.9%.
What's driving this growth in the Middle East?
I think we're seeing a familiar pattern here.
Okay.
Increasing prevalence of diabetes,
Right.
expanding healthcare infrastructure,
Right.
and also a growing awareness of the risks with traditional needle use.
Yeah.
Which is really driving that shift toward these safety-enhanced devices.
Okay, so finally, let's discuss Africa, which currently has the smallest market share,
Okay.
but it still shows some promising growth. So Africa holds about 1% of the global market with an estimated size of 104.50 million USD in 2025
Okay.
and a KGR of 10.7%.
Solid growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And South Africa and Nigeria are highlighted in the report.
Uh-huh.
So South Africa has a projected market size of 36.78 million USD with a KGR of 11.6%.
Okay.
And Nigeria is at 8.36 million USD with a growth rate of 10.9%.
Gotcha.
And then the rest of Africa combined is 59.36 million USD with a CAGR of 9.9%.
So you can really see that even though it's starting from a smaller base, the potential for growth in Africa is significant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What are the key factors contributing to the growth in the African market?
Well, similar to what we've seen in other developing regions,
Uh-huh.
it's mainly the increasing incidence of diabetes
Okay.
and these gradual improvements in healthcare access.
Yeah.
Those are the primary drivers.
It seems like this global rise in diabetes is a fundamental engine powering this market across all continents.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a major factor.
So now let's shift our focus from geography to the types of products being used.
Okay, sounds good.
How is the market segmented by needle length?
So the report indicates that 4 mm needle lengths are likely going to be the most widely used.
Okay.
And I think this is probably because they offer a more comfortable and less painful injection experience,
Right.
which is especially important for groups like children and the elderly.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and the shorter length also has a lower risk of injecting into the muscle tissue.
So that makes sense in terms of patient comfort and safety,
Mm-hmm.
especially for people who might be more sensitive or need frequent injections.
Right.
What about other needle lengths? Are they becoming less relevant?
Not really.
Yeah.
Actually, the 5 mm needle length is identified as the fastest growing segment.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it seems to be like a sweet spot for a lot of adult patients.
Okay.
It offers a good balance between comfort and effective delivery of the medication.
Gotcha. So it's really meeting that need.
Yeah, exactly.
The report also notes the availability of 6 mm and 8 mm lengths, which cater to individual patient needs
Right.
based on body type and specific therapy.
Exactly. So it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
It's not a one-size-fits-all market, and we're seeing different lengths become more or less popular depending on the user and their treatment.
Right.
So now let's consider the therapy outlook.
Okay.
Which types of medications are driving the demand for safety pen needles?
So according to the report, insulin currently accounts for the largest share of the market.
Okay.
And this makes sense, right? Because of the increasing global population living with diabetes
Mm-hmm.
who rely on insulin to manage their blood sugar.
Yeah.
So safety pen needles are essential for safe and convenient self-administration of insulin.
That's a really clear link.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, what about other medications that are administered via pen needles?
So the market for glucagon-like peptide-1 or GLP-1 receptor agonists is expanding rapidly.
Okay, so it's growing quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
What is that?
So these are medications used for managing blood sugar in people with type 2 diabetes, but also increasingly for weight loss.
Oh, wow. So it's got a dual purpose?
Yeah, exactly. It's becoming really popular.
Interesting.
And they require subcutaneous injection, so safety pen needles are a really good option for delivering those medications.
Yeah.
The report also mentions growth hormone as another therapy that uses safety pen needles, although it doesn't give specific market share data for that.
So it's not just about traditional diabetes management.
Mm.
The growth in these other therapeutic areas is also contributing to the demand for safety pen needles.
Absolutely.
Now, who are the main end users of these devices?
Okay.
Where are they being used most frequently?
So right now, long-term care facilities are the biggest end user.
Okay.
And this is driven by the growing need for diabetes management among the elderly and chronically ill individuals who live in these facilities.
Yeah.
So think nursing homes, assisted living centers,
Right.
places like that. And safety pen needles offer ease of use for caregivers and reduce the risk of needle stick injuries.
That makes sense given the high volume of injections required in long-term care settings
Yeah, exactly.
and the need for those safety protocols.
Yeah, definitely.
What about other places where these are commonly used?
So the report highlights acute care facilities, which include hospitals and emergency departments,
Okay.
as the segment experiencing the fastest growth.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so in these fast-paced environments, there's a huge need for efficient and safe insulin delivery,
Yeah, of course.
especially in emergencies or during post-operative care.
Mm-hmm.
So safety pen needles offer a really quick, easy, and safe solution for healthcare professionals.
Right.
And then, of course, home care settings are
Mhm.
another big area where these are used, reflecting that trend towards self-management of chronic conditions.
So while long-term care has the biggest slice of the pie right now,
Uh-huh.
hospitals are showing the fastest increase in usage,
Yeah, for sure.
probably due to those efficiency and safety benefits.
Yeah, it just makes things easier and safer for everyone.
So now let's dig into the factors that are driving this overall market growth we've been talking about.
Okay.
What's really pushing this expansion?
So the report identifies a few key market drivers.
Okay.
Firstly, there's the rising global incidence of pediatric diabetes, and safety pen needles offer a less intimidating and safer option for younger patients and their caregivers.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. Then, of course, there's the general increase in the number of people diagnosed with diabetes worldwide.
Right.
And that's a fundamental driver across all age groups.
So those are both tied to the prevalence of diabetes.
Yeah, exactly.
Are there any other drivers?
Yeah. So the report also mentions the advantages of safety pen needles themselves,
Okay.
things like reduced pain during injection
Yeah.
and a lower risk of infection at the injection site.
That makes sense.
And these are contributing to their growing popularity over traditional syringes.
So it's like a combination of factors.
Yeah.
You know, the rising prevalence of diabetes and the benefits of these needles themselves.
Exactly. It's all connected.
Okay, so those all seem like logical and interconnected reasons for this market expansion.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But are there any factors that might hinder this growth?
Yeah, there are a couple of potential restraints that the report points out.
Okay.
One is product recalls.
Yeah.
You know, those issued by regulatory bodies.
Yeah, of course.
Those could have a temporary negative impact on market growth because they affect consumer confidence and supply chains.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and then another potential barrier is the increasing prevalence of trypanophobia,
Which is?
the fear of needles.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that could be a barrier for some individuals.
Yeah.
Although ongoing efforts in needle design and patient education are aiming to address that.
Those are some important counterpoints to consider.
Yeah.
Now, looking ahead,
Okay.
what are some of the key trends that are expected to shape the safety pen needles market in the coming years?
So the report emphasizes technological advancements
Right.
and the integration of alternative technologies as a major trend.
What do you mean by that?
So this could involve things like innovations in needle design to minimize discomfort,
Right.
developing more user-friendly safety mechanisms,
Okay.
or even integrating smart features and connectivity with digital health platforms.
Wow. So we're talking next level stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how technology is influencing even these simple devices.
For sure.
And then another key trend is the improvement and expansion of healthcare infrastructure, especially in developing regions.
Right.
And that will also play a big role in supporting market growth.
It's fascinating to see how even a simple device like a needle can be influenced by all these things.
Yeah, you're really...
The broader technological and infrastructural developments.
Uh-huh.
So finally, let's briefly touch on who the main players are in this competitive landscape.
Okay.
Who are the big names?
So the safety pen needles market is really competitive, with both global companies and smaller regional players.
Right.
The report specifically mentions McKesson Medical Surgical Inc., Lynx Medical Products, Inc., and Allison Medical, Inc.,
Okay.
as key companies that have a strong presence and offer a variety of products.
And there have been some recent developments in the market from some of these players, haven't there?
Yeah, there have.
Okay, what are those?
So in September 2022, Terumo Corporation launched their Fine Glide sterile pen needles in India.
Okay.
And these are aimed at patients who need regular self-injections. And then in May 2022, Roche Diabetes Care India introduced their ACCU fine pen needles,
Okay.
which are designed for comfort and to reduce pain during insulin delivery.
Gotcha.
So these launches really show the innovation and competition in the market as companies try to improve their products and reach more people.
So it's a dynamic environment with both those established players and new entrants
Yeah,
who are constantly looking for ways to innovate
right.
and capture market share. So to bring it all together for our listeners,
Okay.
we've seen that the global market for safety pen needles is experiencing really significant and sustained growth,
Yeah.
driven primarily by that increasing prevalence of diabetes and a global push for safer injection practices.
For sure.
While North America currently has the largest market share,
Uh-huh.
the Asia-Pacific region is expanding at the fastest rate.
Right.
We've also talked about how different needle lengths
Yeah.
and the growth in both insulin and GLP-1 therapies are shaping the market,
Uh-huh.
and how long-term care facilities are currently the largest end user,
Right.
but acute care facilities are showing the fastest growth.
Exactly.
So it's a really complex and evolving landscape,
Yeah, it is.
but it's also full of opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
So thinking about all of this,
Right.
it prompts a crucial question.
Okay.
Considering the continuous advancements we're seeing in diabetes management
Uh-huh.
and this clear momentum in the market,
Yeah.
how might the design and functionality of safety pen needles evolve even further in the coming years to optimize patient comfort and cater to the needs of different and emerging therapies?
It's a really good question, and I think we're going to see a lot of innovation in areas like needle design, safety mechanisms, and even smart features.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an exciting time.
So what other significant factors beyond those we discussed today could reshape this market's trajectory?
Well, I think things like regulatory changes, reimbursement policies,
Okay.
and even patient preferences are all going to play a role.
Yeah.
It's a dynamic market that's constantly evolving.
So this deep dive reveals a sector with huge growth and innovation,
Yeah,
offering valuable insights into healthcare and medical device development.
it's a fascinating area to watch.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be back soon with another episode.
Looking forward to it.
Until then, keep exploring.
And stay curious.
And I'll see you next time.
See you then.